Muito bom dia para todos e todas. Good morning, everyone. Brevemente em português, bem-vindos ao 49º Congresso da Luso-American Education Foundation, subordinado ao tema Aldeia Global e coordenado pelo Instituto PBBI, o Instituto Português Além Fronteiras da Universidade do Estado da Califórnia, em Fresno. Esta sessão será na língua inglesa. So we'll transition to English. As I said in Portuguese, this session will be in English. On behalf of the Luso-American Education Foundation, the 49th Conference on Education and Culture, this year, once again, and since 2020, because of all the reasons we know, it has been online through Portuguese Beyond Borders Institute at California State University, Fresno. Welcome to everyone that is joining us on Zoom, and especially those also that are joining us on social media outlets. And thanks to all the groups. Usually anywhere, it depends on the group's appetite, but anywhere between 20 and 40 that have shared, and we're very, very thrilled that we were able to reach in the last 2 days now a bit over 6,500 people, and that's great. So this session is called Women of the Portuguese Diaspora, Voices of Change and Continuity, a panel on women's roles as storytellers, as caretakers of culture, agents of social transformation in the community, and I would say in society at large as well. We're very happy to have 3 women with us. We had one more invited, so hopefully she'll be able to make it. But we want to thank Angela Costa Simões and Linette Darosa and Nadine Barroca for joining us this morning and spending a little bit of their busy time with us. And as we tackle a few questions that were sent to, more than questions, or topics for discussion that were sent to everyone, so we could have kind of a little bit of a guiding light of what we're going to do. So I'm just going to take, if you don't mind, maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and have each one of you kind of present yourself. I mean, I could talk about each one of you. I mean, I know, of course, Angela very well, and I know Linette well. I know Nadine well, but not as well as I know the other two, but I could talk about her father for hours. So let's start with Angela. And if you'll just do a little bit of a bio, who is Angela Simões and your involvement in the community, please.
Sure. Well, thank you, Denise, for having me on the panel. You always put together a fantastic lineup for this conference, so thanks to all your work. My name is Angela Costa Simões. So 3rd generation Portuguese American, born and raised in Sacramento. And my Portuguese journey has been, before I could walk, my cousins and I were on floats in parades dressed as angels, and then we were carrying the rosaries in the parades. Then we were queens and side maids. Got involved with Luso-American. I served as their state youth president for that, which was a great experience, and I could talk about that. Then after college, my first job was with PALCUS in Washington, D.C., and I have been very involved with that organization ever since. Not working for them, but after my first year working, I moved back to California and joined their board. And so that has been primarily my focus in the community, is the work I've done with PALCUS. I also did join a folklore group that my husband and his family had founded, so I did a little bit of that. So I think the only things I haven't done are played on a soccer team and marched in a band. But done almost everything else. And yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion.
Thank you, Angela. And it's never too late to join a marching band. They actually need some recruits, so you're right up the alley. Linette, Linette Darosa from the beautiful area of San Diego, and a beautiful lady, and a person who has done many things for San Diego, who I've had the pleasure of working with, and things related to education. Linette, a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Oh, Denise, this has been so exciting. And I've had a chance to kind of reminisce 49 years ago when we started this conference in San Diego. So it's been a long time. I'll just say I'm a relic, I think, now. But anyway, I was born in San Diego in the Portuguese barrio, and it was really important to my parents that they knew I had 2 families and 2 homes. So I have a large family here in San Diego, in Point Loma, the Portuguese area, and also in Santa Cruz de Ribeiras in Pico. So that I was really fortunate because I had many cousins that were mentors around me. And between my cousins and my parents, they really set the path for me to grow as being uma portuguesa. Despite my mother always saying, tu és sempre diferente que as outras, that I always had to be different than everybody else. And that was the psychology of the time, not to be your own person, to be just like everybody else. But thanks to that, that rebellion, I really was able early on to be involved in folkloric dancing, of course, the festas, and music, especially because of my dad being a musician. And then the Cabrillo Festival when I was in high school. And then I went on to college, and all of a sudden we had the revolution, and the schools did not know what to do with all these children of refugee families. So that's when I met, I think, Denise, not too long after that we started the Portuguese bilingual program here in San Diego, which grew, lasted probably 8 to 10 years. But after about 8 years, I went on to work with a district in bilingual education and also in race and human relations. I ended my career as a school administrator after 38 years, so that was enough. And I thank the Luso-Education Foundation because of them, I was able to go to Coimbra for a summer course that was really eye-opening, I have to say, and as well as having the opportunity to get to know people through the Luso, which through the years created many, I was going to say stories, but I'll say memories. And we had great times together. Yeah. And
stories, I'm sure, as well. And from Linette, another lovely lady, Nadine Barroca, who has a tradition to upkeep with a father that is an icon here in the Portuguese American community.
I'm feeling a little bit like a Nepo baby here. My name is Nadine Barroca. I'm retired now 4 years from a 35-year career at Chevron Corporation in finance. And I was involved with growing up, we grew up in San Francisco. And so it was interesting because even though my dad was very, very involved in the Portuguese community, we never got exposed to a lot of the stuff that was happening in San Jose or in the other areas of the state. So I wasn't a big, we went to Sopish once in a while, but like the festas and all that stuff, we were never like in the Queens thing and all that stuff. We never really got involved in that. We did do a lot of travel back and forth to Portugal. My dad's family is from the outside of Aveiro in Ilhavo, which is the biggest, smallest little town ever, because everybody you talk to is from Ilhavo. And I'm like, how could that be? But anyway, it's so we did do a lot of that, and so that's how the Portuguese culture. I've been able to be exposed to the Portuguese culture. I took Spanish when I was growing up because we didn't have Portuguese in San Francisco, and then I actually went to San Diego State and took the Portuguese language class there when I went to San Diego State. So that was wonderful because I love the Portuguese language. And actually, my first language was Portuguese. When I was like 4 years old, we were living in Portugal, and that was my first language. But my mom didn't speak Portuguese, so we didn't really keep it up, unfortunately. I was on the advisory board in 23 for the Luso-American Education Foundation, and subsequently have been serving on the board of the Luso-American Education Foundation since 2024. And yes, I've decided to get involved in all this because as in honor of my father, who was very, very involved in the Portuguese community and continues to be very involved in the Portuguese community. So
thank you, Nadine. And Angela's going to the band, and you will be the next queen of the festa. So we don't want you left out, and Linette will be president. So we got it all worked out here. But that's seriously, thank you all. So first question and first topic is basically, women are really caretakers of a lot of things in society, not just in the Portuguese American community, and not just in the Portuguese American organizations. including, it was not too long ago that we had one of these sessions. I think it was actually 2 years ago, and one of the participants actually said something that at that time, we're talking about 2023, it's not 1923. At that time, there were women that would go with their husbands still, this is in 2023, to a valley area, and it could be, I guess, anywhere, but it was in the valley. She mentioned a town, and it's on our archive, we can go look. And they stayed in the parking lot chit-chatting while the men were having the meetings. So this was just 2 years ago. But women have been in one way or another very involved in the Portuguese American organizations, often behind the scenes. Today, many are stepping forward as visible leaders. I don't think that many philharmonicas or folklore groups or even Portuguese American halls would be as visible as they are for the women that have stepped up in the last 10 years, especially. How do you see women reshaping leadership models in our community? I'll start with Angela. And what new paths, and then I'll start with everybody when, we'll go on a rotating basis. And what new paths do you envision really for the next generation of women, young ladies who are now, let's say, in their 18 and 20s and going to college and maybe coming back to their community or going to another community and wanting to be a role model or have a leading role in the organization? How do you see this?
Well, Denise, I don't know where to start. There's a lot there.
Yeah, you can do a doctoral thesis with this. That's true.
I think I remember that panel discussion, and I remember being shocked to hear that because I didn't know that that was still the case, that, women were not allowed in the meetings. And then I actually recently discovered that today there is a festa that only men are allowed to be president still to this day. I was just floored because, as you said, nothing happens without the women doing the work, right? And not to say that the men don't work either, but it's a team effort, right? So that's disappointing to me that still exists. If it's a men's club, that's one thing, but if it's a festa and everybody's helping, why are we still only allowing men to be president? I think that's just ridiculous. So listen, there are some people, women included, who are happy to stay behind the scenes and really don't care about the recognition, and which is great because we, again, it's a team sport. We need everybody working. But I would say that if there's a woman or women that want to take a more prominent role, a leadership role, they have ideas of how to, progress things, maybe do some new things, do something different, and they're being told that they can't do it because they're a woman, then I would say find another organization or outlet that allows you to do those things. I wouldn't let one organization or committee stop you just because they say, well, with this committee, you can't do it. There's lots of opportunity. There are a lot of organizations out there that would be happy to have women in leadership roles because they already have. And then if you can't find something that you like, start your own thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the next, Luso or the next, hall, because that's a huge effort. But, there are lots of new initiatives being launched that are, kind of exist online, but then they have in-person events. But there's room to start new things, right? And I think we're going to get into this later in the discussion, because we as a community have to evolve to meet the needs of the people in our community and the different age groups. So I would say that, as someone, I guess, on the younger side, even though I'm old enough to get a lifetime award, but, I don't remember a time where women weren't in charge. So maybe I'm unique in that way, or maybe it just didn't register to me that, well, the women in charge didn't hold the title, but they were calling the shots. They were directing everybody. They were the ones, conducting the kitchen and things like that. They were the ones saying how the hall got set up. So, from my perspective, women were always in charge. And so I never hesitated to step into a leadership role. I don't, if there was a time where somebody said, you can't do this because you're a woman, I have blocked it out because I probably just said, I don't hear you and I'm going to do it anyway. And so I would say, also look at, for the women who are in college and in starting their professional careers, look around you at the non-Portuguese world. There's a lot of women in leadership roles. And so why would it be any different for our community, right? So I think that we have a lot of female leaders in our community that we can serve as examples to the younger generations. But I would say we should also take a page from the non-Portuguese community world as well, and that there are more and more women in leadership roles. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I'll pass it to Nadine and then to Linette. I think that, and it's interesting, just adding a comment to that in Portugal, that has changed long before the community. I mean, we had a prime minister, in the 1990s, a woman prime minister, and some of the societies, I have to say, the fraternal society, especially Luso, has had a bit of a different role in there, because I remember that in early 1980s, when Carlos Lopes won the marathon there in Los Angeles, that was the year that the first woman was elected president of Luso, and that was Rosie Silveira here from Tulare. And I remember because we were celebrating her, and then Carlos Lopes wins the marathon, and everybody kind of forgot about who's going to be president, and it was all about Carlos Lopes. But Nadine, your thoughts on that? Women leadership roles in the community, and how can we envision the next generation and go forward from a time.
Yeah, like many women, my leadership style is emphasize teamwork and collaboration. And working in the oil industry, especially early on, it was a heavily male-dominated command and control environment, the good old boys. And I always used to think that when I watched these guys get out, walk outside the doors of the building, I always thought they're they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else, right? They're get off your high horse kind of thing. I think, like Angela, I never thought that I couldn't do what I want to do. It never occurred to me that as a woman, I couldn't do something, because I just did it, right? So I think that the shift in the last few years to a more inclusive workplace, building trust and a good work-life balance is critical, because I think then you have voices that you can hear across the board, and you give a diversity of opinion and things. And so I think that, it's interesting, because, the fraternal societies is male, right? And actually, wasn't the union actually men only? Because at the time, the men from Portugal that came over were really coming on their own and sending the money back to Portugal, right? So it is a development, and the Portuguese European community has been more male oriented, but I agree, it's the women who are actually getting a lot of the stuff done. So,
Linette, your thoughts?
Well, Angela and Nadine made many good points. We're so fortunate to live in today's world. Just recently, and I don't know, there might not be time later to talk about this project I'm working with Zeca Rodriguez on the Portuguese community here, but we did some interviews this summer about the beginnings of the Festa em Ribeiras, which those traditions were brought here to Point Loma. So, but we found out that it was the brotherhoods, the organizations, the brotherhoods, no women. Women were not allowed in those early festas to be in it. Only the men were holding the vadas, holding the crown, holding the flags. When I started looking at passports, I noticed that a lot of women did not have last names. Come to find out that on those ledgers, some of those women who did not have last names, because someone said to me, in those days, we're talking about 1800s, a lot of them were just property. They were married off, and they were to raise families and take care of the house. So we have really come a long way. In fast forwarding to the beginning of the Portuguese fishing, like, let's say, not in the early 1900s, but looking at the 30s, 40s, and so on. I mean, women really a little different than the dairies, because the men would go home, where women who had fishing husbands, they were it. They were the disciplinarian. They were took care of whatever the bills. As a matter of fact, when there was the demise of the fishing, a lot of men that came home, the women were in charge, and it didn't bode well for a lot of families. And there was a lot of separation and divorce because of that. So when I look at today, we do have a lot of women involved. I've always seen women growing up involved in the organizations and at the Portuguese Hall. Today, this year, our Festa do Espírito Santo, she is a single mother, and she is the president of the Festa this year. So I think because our generations are more Americanized, as Nadine was talking about, I think that in today's world, even our hall president is a single a woman. So I think we've evolved to that. My bigger concern is how to get people involved, and have their voice, so that we can be teachers of our descendants, and share all of this with them before it's lost. So anyway.
Indeed. Well, that's a perfect segment for the next topic, which is continuity and renewal. And so, and as I put it, our organizations have really rich histories. I mean, no organization, sometimes people, for example, in the Azores say, why doesn't the Casas dos Açores in the US have the big presence that they have in Brazil? And I said, and I told this to the now past president of the Azores, Carlos Cesar, when he was very big about building a very big Casas dos Açores in California. I said, listen, you have 85 Casas dos Açores. There are 85 halls. They're all a Casas dos Açores. I mean, they're all, a House of Portugal. They're all basically, continuing the traditions in their own way. They just don't have that official name. So, we've been around for a while, and we've had that conversation the last couple of days. Do you believe that things can continue to operate as they have been in the past, or must we reimagine them to stay relevant to younger women and men, of course? And what changes really would you prioritize? And let me preface just by saying this, that a few years ago, I think Angela knows this story, and a few years ago, I was at an event, and it was a young woman in her early 30s who was president of this organization that had been very male-oriented and very elderly men, makes me look like a kid, some of their ages. And so and she was very, very upset because she had been president for almost a year, and the younger people weren't going to the things, and she said, they've always wanted younger people. Here I am, and nothing's happening. And then I asked her, what did you do? She said, well, I did the matanza, and I did this, and I did that. Angela's here because she remembers this. And I said to her, I'm not going to say her name because it doesn't want to, her name starts with a D. I said, D, that's, I think, is the problem. It's that the events are not relevant to the young people. It doesn't make any difference if it's someone 30 or someone 90 doing them. It's just they may not be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with Portuguese, radio. You can have it on the internet where everybody can listen to it. But if it's a 9-hour long program, nobody's going to listen to it. If it's like a 15-minute segment, maybe. So we'll start this time with, we started with Angela. So Nadine, what do you think that, how do we reinvent ourselves, or do we keep this going the way it is? And what changes would you prioritize to make this, in your perspective, someone, obviously we're not talking what young people would like from our perspective also, but we don't see them at the events.
I definitely think we need to reimagine our organizations. How we work together, how we support each other. I don't have the magic bullet, but I think we need to figure out how to connect with the later generations, the third and fourth generation Portuguese descendants who, may not be speaking the language, who are maybe, from interracial marriages that were mixed, with everything. I think we need to open our arms to all of these communities, and those that are interested in promoting or, thriving in the Portuguese culture. I think we need to figure out how to be relevant to them. I totally agree. I think Portuguese language it would be great if we could figure out how to develop Portuguese language in our state, in the schools and stuff. I know that's a huge, heavy lift that's been tried for a long time, but I love the Portuguese language, or even, I mean, the Brazilian language, the Portuguese, the version, the different, Angolan, whatever. I used to know how to say breakfast in 3 different Portuguese languages, and I always had to figure out which country I was in and how to say the breakfast in the right language, Angolan or Brazilian or Portuguese, but or Portugal. But I am surprised how and this kind of was how Luso-American Education, how the life insurance group got together originally, where they merged the two different big fraternal organizations back when. They consolidated. And I do think we need to think about, is there a way for us to come together as a stronger force? Because I was at a function recently where there were all these different little organizations. They were all trying to raise money. They were all trying to give scholarships, and they all had their little nonprofits that they were trying to maintain. And I think that if we could figure out a way to be more inclusive and support a broader organization, maybe under a single umbrella, maybe not, but that might be helpful. And then with those resources, figure out how to, and it's definitely the younger generation is who we need to communicate with. And I do not know how to get to them. I don't know, but you're right. The attention span, the lack of time that they have, because they're so programmed, it's difficult.
I'm going to turn to Linette, but just FYI, I reached out, during my classes. I have Portuguese, but my classes are not mostly Portuguese. I mean, I have 79 students, but I maybe have 28 Portuguese. The others are not.
Yeah.
But I reached out to those who I know who are, and asked them a little bit so I could have some information, and they think things are fine. They just like going to a festa once a year, and that's great for them. So I mean, that we have to take that into consideration, because and understandably so. I mean, most of these kids are doing college degrees. Many of them are working 18 to 24 hours a week plus, what they're doing. So it's not easy. But Linette, the same question to you, and kind of prefacing it also by saying that San Diego is a little bit in a unique situation, because you only have one hall. You may have 1 or 2 more organizations, but they're all kind of tied in with the hall. And then
we have 12 organizations, more or less.
Is that right?
Yeah, but in different sizes. But I just want to, because this is very timely, this question. What Nadine was saying about the mixed marriages, organically through the years, this is, as people were not just marrying somebody from the Azores or somebody from their own close ethnic background, and they ventured out an Azorian with them, and they danced, let's say, and which now is very commonplace. But people, as they ventured out beyond Portuguese, Italian, Mexican, American, whatever, of course, those spouses and their friends would come, which then we would share our traditions and our culture. But about, let's see, I don't know, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, something interesting happened to me, which was somebody from up north, a group came down, El Manu, Costa was part of that, asking the Portuguese Historical Center to see if they could find someone or someone's to see if we could have Portuguese taught at the high school. So being that I, had worked for the schools, I was recruited, and we did do that, and it's very successful. And you're right, we only have a handful of Portuguese in that class, although we have close to around 100 students in the program, at different periods, different levels. But going back to that, so they sent at that time a woman by the name of Odette Amarelo from the East Coast. Do you know her? Yeah, I didn't know her before. And she said something that at first I kind of shut down to, but then it made a lot of sense. She says, you're going to offer because they had programs, and she was part of it on the East Coast. She said, you're going to offer Portuguese, but it's not for the Portuguese community or for the Portuguese kids. And that kind of took me back a little bit. I said, what are you talking about? Because at first I thought, well, I don't know if we have enough people in our community, young people, that would take this at high school age. I don't know. But once she said that, it really opened the doors. And then it made so much more sense. because it's, again, that expansion of our culture to people who aren't even Portuguese. And something just happened in the last year, which I thought I was prepared for, but it took me back to, and I'm sure it took other people, that in our Portuguese American dancers now, we have non-Portuguese in it. And so I really think this might be the way to go. And of course, when it's festa time, the day of the festa, everybody comes out and we invite everybody. When it's the Romarias, the Madeiran Romarias at Christmas, you're a Madeiran that night, you know, singing as well, whether you can even speak Portuguese. But I think that's really the way around joy or around celebration, people easily come. If it's something more of presentations, I don't know if they'll come. Maybe they will. But certainly around food, we have Festa da Lapa, which is the origins are from Madeira, and people come. They bring their children. It's not as big by any means as our Festa Speech Santo, but we have people coming and they bring their families and their youngs, and those are the memories that those kids are going to remember too, whether they're Portuguese or not. So I think that's kind of key, is to look at, as you said, Denise, our young people are very busy, you know, and so whether they're women, whatever, I mean, they're just really busy. And so maybe take hold and expand on what we can offer to attract people to come, whether they're Portuguese or not.
Indeed. Angela, your thoughts, and I know you have some.
So yes, we have a huge missed opportunity. I think it's been a missed opportunity for the past 15 years, frankly. You have to meet people where they are and look at the community, especially that younger age group that we're looking to attract, and ask, what do they need? And what are they looking for? You know, their lives are very different. They are young families. Their weekends are full of sports and extracurricular activities. School is much more demanding for kids these days. So, you know, they have a lot more homework. And so, you know, there could be some sort of survey done to the local, you know, a hall could do it to figure out what do our community need. You know, if there was a place where I could go drop off our daughter for a couple of hours, you know, after school, and she's exposed to, you know, it doesn't have to be a Portuguese class, but maybe there's, you know, Portuguese elements of culture and language and music, and she gets to meet new friends and establish a network there. That would be something I absolutely would, you know, maybe drive out of my way to go do. If there were events that fit better with, you know, I guess family schedules or interests of the family, right? Like you said, not everybody wants to go to a matanza, you know, but, you know, something that's a little more modern, you know, what are the schools doing? What kind of events are the schools doing? And how can we adapt that in the Portuguese halls? You know, from the fraternal side, I've been saying this for a long time. You know, they have these captive audiences, and there's an opportunity to educate the students and the young generations on how to apply for college and all the opportunities that are available to them. Here are all the scholarships, not just the Luso scholarship, but there's a lot of scholarships out there. They're not huge, but they're out there for Portuguese American students. Here are all the study abroad opportunities. If you're a young professional, here are some professional opportunities with Portuguese companies or with American companies that are operating in Portugal, right? And then from the bare bones, insurance. They sell insurance. I don't understand insurance. Educate me on why I need your product. Don't just tell me I need it. Tell me why I need it and how it's going to help me in the future, right? So there are all these things that they could be doing to engage the community on an intellectual level, on a professional level, on an academic level, in addition to the cultural stuff. I'm not saying get rid of the cultural stuff, because that's who we are, right? And that's that's our pride, and that's, you know, what makes us different than anyone else, right? You can maintain that, and you can even add different things, right? There's modern Portuguese music that's really great. There's you know, now there's fusion foods, you know, where you've got the bacalhau being infused with cheese and stuff like that, you know, and the nata that has chocolate in it now. I mean, there's lots of different things that have evolved in Portugal that just haven't made it here. And so I just, there's so many different ways ways that the halls and the fraternals and other organizations could be offering things of greater value to our community, and they're just not asking the question, right? And it always comes back down to, all right, fine, who's going to do the work? Who's going to pay for it? I get that. And so you have to, okay, and you don't have to introduce everything all at once. Okay, we're going to try this one little program. How do we fund it? Who's going to volunteer to do it? And that sort of thing. But I guarantee you, if it works out well, if it turns out well, you get people engaging in that little program, you're going to have more volunteers that come. And you may even have parents that look and say, that actually is really cool. I'm going to make time out of my schedule, even if it's once a week or 1 or 2 times a month, and I'll go help, right? So people will dedicate their time. They'll make time for things that they feel are very valuable and valuable to themselves, not just, yes, it's a very noble thing to say, well, it helps the community at large. Yes, it does. But I also have my family to think about. And my family has to be a priority as well. So if I can address all the things with my family, and then if I have some extra time for the community, I will. But that's pretty rare, right? These days, everybody is so busy. I mean, if you talk to anybody, oh, I'm so busy. I've got this, I got that. I got, the kids, the school, the this, the that, because it's a different time, right? So I think the halls and all the organizations really need to adapt quickly, because otherwise, this will be a very different conversation in 10 years where we'll be saying, okay, so there's how many organizations left and how do we keep those alive, right? So
yeah,
my thoughts.
Right. And we're all tapping into the same pool of people. That's the thing, right? And that's where I see this overlap. It's like you've got volunteers, you've got money, you got all this stuff, and you've got all of these organizations trying to tap into that same little pool. And how do we maximize that? I like your idea about the centralized information about scholarships and things like that. The summer camp, Luso summer camp, which we couldn't do this past year, that is a key. We need to beef that up and get that going and really publicize it and market it and all that stuff. One of the board directors of Luso was saying, hey, Luso-American Education Foundation, our website, we need to work on our website. I mean, I know they just redid it through financial, but we need to make it a resource, like you said. That's where we should be having all of the scholarship information, all of the opportunities, all of this stuff that you were saying. That could be a central repository. We can leverage that.
Linette? I want to add, because these are really good ideas. And even though we have newsletters, some of the organizations have newsletters, and they might mention some scholarships. What I learned, who has time, are the parents and grandparents, retired parents and grandparents. I learned that through when we had the census, Make Portuguese Count, that effort going to all the different organizations. They were so sick of hearing from us because we were saying the same thing. And we would say, make sure you tell your children, make sure your so the word got out. And so I really think maybe this idea of, because you get the information if you belong to that organization, but not everybody does. So maybe a broken record at all the organizations, or I know that Idel Miru at San Diego is trying to pull together with the hall president I don't know if they have a name for it yet, but a committee that represents every organization, different venues, so that it was really, I think, with the intent of when we have special guests or whatever is there. But this venue might be able to work for that as well, to take back this to your organization. So it gets the wheels turning.
So shameless plug for PALCUS, right? So we do have that online repository of scholarships. It's on our website. It's also, we have an online database of businesses, schools, organizations, every Portuguese, anything that we are aware of in the country. It's available, and it can be a list. It's also an interactive map, right? So you can pull information from that, or maybe just send people to that. But to the point about newsletters, you know, newsletters are not utilized as much as they should be by different organizations. And it's such an easy thing to distribute information on a regular basis, right? And so I don't know if that's because people just don't know how to do it, or, you know, it is a bit time consuming, but it's not impossible, right? So I think newsletters is a big missed opportunity to communicate. And then social media, you know, everybody's on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know how to do TikTok, and I don't know how you make a video about insurance on TikTok. I really don't. But someone out there can figure it out, right? And you know, there's enough content in our community to do daily posts on every platform. And there have to be some young people out there that are social savvy, right? And would be willing. Maybe they donate 1 or 2 hours a week, or maybe a bunch of organizations pull their funds and pay them for 1 or 2 hours a week, you know, to do some posts. So I think we have to get creative on how we communicate and push things out, right? I know that from my perspective with Palcus, I mean, we're on all the social channels. We try to post as much as we can. We are growing our following, but we're not getting everybody, right? So even if you just took what Palcus was publishing and shooting it out to your network, hey, it's free information. That's the whole point of our newsletters and our website and our social posts, is just to get information out there. Like, that's all we're trying to do, so that, you know, there's, you know, Católica University has a fellowship program where you can go study undergrad or graduate degree all 4 years for free. Why don't they have 300 applicants every year? They don't. Like, they do give them away, but they should be like fighting people off for those kinds of opportunities. And it's because people just don't know about them, despite us like shouting from the rooftop. So I think we all need to do our part to disseminate, you know, the information. So,
you know, I just want to put in, because it just kind of occurred to me, this would be through, I was thinking about our Portuguese program in the high school, but it wouldn't have to have a Portuguese program in the high school. If the high school counselors of any school would know that, because kids nowadays for graduation have to have a certain amount of community service hours. If we could offer them that, you know, that, hey, are you Portuguese? Maybe you want to set up a, you know, social media platform and post, and that can be used towards your community service. I mean, I was just that, so.
Well, and I also think we need to figure out how to branch into like the Brazilian and I mean, we seem to be, you know, we've got the Azores, we've got the Portuguese continental, we have, you know, I think we need, the Brazilian is a huge population that we don't seem to mesh, right? For whatever reason. I mean, even the fact that, you know, a lot of Portuguese do not want to learn Brazilian Portuguese. It's like, really? Okay, you know what? If you learn the language, it's very easy to translate into continental, right?
It's the same language. It's just
yeah, thing.
You know,
well, even to, you know, Denise has talked about this in the past, you know, pulling in the Hispanic community, right?
Yeah.
A lot of his students are Hispanic, and, you know, Hispanic kids that already speak Spanish fluently, why are they going to take Spanish in school? Like, they can take, you know, Portuguese, right? So, and they need to earn community service hours too. So why not have them work on a newsletter or do some social posts or something like that, right? I mean, you don't have to be Portuguese to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, you don't. Just a couple of thoughts to what you said. First of all, I think community schools are still important, even in areas where there are schools that teach Portuguese.
For sure.
We've gotten away from that. Camões Institute's gotten away from that, but Camões Institute's gotten away from everything, except they don't even do an honor to the man's 500th birthday. But the community schools, they used to be a big push, as all of you remember, you know, and I'm sure Linette remembers Emilia.
Darosa.
Emilia, yes, I can't think of what was that again?
Emilia Mendoza.
Emilia Mendoza, yeah, right. Well, Emilia, you know, was the one that promoted this. This is, you know, 40 plus years ago, that promoted the establishment of community schools. I mean, they existed, but they just multiplied by, you know, by dozens and dozens, you know, when she was director of the Portuguese language for the California and for the United States. And at one time she had the US and Canada. And so these schools may not, you know, they may not teach what you may be disappointed if you accept that your child at the age of 6 or 7 or 9 or 10 is going to a community school 2 hours a week, that's usually what they are, and that you may be disappointed that at the end of 10 months, he or she is not fluent in Portuguese. Well, that ain't gonna happen, okay? But they, besides learning some words and some phrases and learning some basic things, they also learn a lot of culture. And so the community schools do an excellent job. They're usually tied to churches or organizations like that, and they do an excellent job. And I think we've been worried a little bit too much about saying, how do I find a teacher? Okay, I think any of us here, well, I'm a teacher too, but I mean, I think any of us who's not teachers can teach, and Linette is, but you can teach even if you think your Portuguese is not great. It doesn't make any difference. You're not going to be teaching them quote unquote perfect Portuguese, whatever the hell that means, but you're going to be teaching some basic things. So anybody that can communicate a little bit in the language can be a volunteer teacher, or if your or school is set up with where it charges parents, I don't know. I know some schools charge like $150 a year. It's not like they're charging, like $15 a month or $30 a month, something like that. And then they give, some kind of a gratification, honorarium to whoever does that. I think we've been worried a little bit too much, and we've been worried about these schools being recognized by Simões. What does that mean? Okay. The important thing is if make the school fit your community. I think Tulari's had a success story with that. Turlock has had a success story with that because they make it fit their community, and I think that it's important. Sometimes we think that high school is the answer, and it is great. And I'm all for that. I did that for 22 years. But I think that having a community school, even if it's just 15 or 20 students, doesn't make any difference numbers,
Well, and to that point, that some people say, well, there's no community school where I live. Well, then start one, right?
Find one.
But let's get one going. And even if you don't have a Portuguese hall, you've got a local school somewhere, ask the school if you can borrow a room for a couple of hours, So there's always a way to make something happen.
Actually, it's a very good idea. There's after school programs. California still has a very good amount of money in the public education system for after school programs. If you're going to, the only thing you can't go to a local school, as Linette can probably tell you this better as an administrator than I was, that I never wanted to be one anyway, because it's so much headache. But the idea is that you just can't say it's only for Portuguese kids. It's a Portuguese enrichment.
It has to.
It's a Portuguese multicultural enrichment program, and it's open to everybody. That's great, and that's
Another idea is the summer camp.
correct.
Do it to the summer. It can build over time, because a lot of times parents are, what am I going to do? There isn't as much money, or there isn't money for summer school enrichment, so it could serve as something like that.
Yeah, and Luso does a good job with the summer camp. I do believe I might disagree a bit with Nadine, or agree. I don't know. We haven't talked about this, but I actually think Luso should do 3 summer camps. There should be in 3 regional areas of the state, because you can't expect people from San Diego to fly there.
That's a good point.
quickly.
Yeah, let's just get
Let's
get one organized first. I was,
that's the
we
problem.
didn't, this last one, we didn't get off the ground in time. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But I think it is a great resource. I know my son went to it, and all of a sudden he was like, wow, this is really cool. And he got better appreciation. I mean, it was great.
Yeah. We have to have it this year because I've been waiting for Aurelia to be old enough to go. So
Okay. All right. We'll work on
she's
that.
finally old enough to go.
So,
Yeah, we need to work on that.
and one thing that all 3 of you brought up in one way or another was just scholarships. Just throwing out this idea that we've started Fresno State. So some people don't want to give for scholarship for Portuguese language. I mean, they're really into business, or they're really into health, or they're really into this or into that. So there's this wonderful man called Randy Ataid, whose grandparents, one of the few in the valley, grandparents are from Porto, not from any island anywhere. And Randy is a Fresno State grad, and Randy lived in San Diego for a while, actually, and now he lives in Texas. And Randy started this scholarship for him and his family. It's called the Randy Ataid Scholarship Program. You must be a business major. Ag business, any kind of business. You must be a business major in order to get a scholarship, okay? But you have to take at least 1 Portuguese class. So, this year I have 3 students who are in my classroom,
Nice.
business majors.
That's great.
Who are not Portuguese, who are taking Portuguese because they got the 600 because it's trying to give a one-time donation of 25,000, and it earns, as you know, dividends. And so we're able to give $1,800, 3 scholarships of $600 each. So I think if you find someone who's passionate about nursing or passionate about medicine and can start, a pre-med, scholarship, and then just put in there, one of the courses you have to take is a Portuguese course.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good thing to build up the university courses, and to get, Portuguese Americans or other Americans, this is obviously at the university level. We can't say only to one ethnic group. It's open to everybody. There's all three of these that apply to all three Portuguese background, but it can be to anybody. So that's another way of being a little bit more. And to add to Nadine's point also about, and Angela's and Linette mentioned as well, maybe getting these young students. Well, I think that sometimes when Luso gives a scholarship, should be some kind of
Oh yeah, we're trying to catch. Yeah.
yeah.
We're working on trying to figure out how to do that.
In the organization, just like years ago, Linette remembers this, and I think Nadine and Angela also is much younger, but remembers the grants were given, but at the annual meeting, the people who went to study in Portugal for 3 months or whatever, or 3 weeks, would come back and make a presentation. I think it's important for people to understand that there's money going to them, but there's something that should come back one way or another.
Well, to your point about,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nadine.
I was just getting to your point, Linette, about, these scholarship recipients, some of them are very, very well versed in technology, and why can't we get them to commit a little bit of, time? They get a scholarship, but you have to devote a couple of hours to help the organization,
Let's have someone coordinate that. Linette.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm thinking about, we've been trying to get the word out for our older, I guess I'm in that category, our older Portuguese, as they're approaching, we're all on borrowed time, to think about giving to the hall in their estate. But besides that, it wouldn't be a bad idea because of gifting of some of these older people who might not have children or really want to be more charitable, to gift annually to something like what Randy Tate is doing. That's a great idea. It's a great idea. I have to say, our community, when we were trying to get the Portuguese in the high school off the ground, the district told us, it wasn't the district, it was Flood, pretty much. It was saying that they wanted to see what we did first in terms of acquiring funds. And the community was, we acquired $30,000. And that was just asking, not even any kind of fundraiser. So, it's something that we haven't that I know of, haven't pursued too much, but it might be worth looking at. No, it might be worth looking.
I think legacy giving, just the late CSU Fresno and CSU Chancellor just died a couple of weeks ago. You might have seen on social media, Joseph Castro, his wife, Mary Borges Castro. Joseph, that was one of the many conversations he and I had, and he lamented how the Portuguese community were doing so well, and yet we don't have a lot of legacy giving to organizations such as, especially in the educational level at university, because I mean, there are that I always use the Armenian community, because the Armenian community has a program at Fresno State. They're very small. I mean, who speaks Armenian other than the Armenians in Armenia and the community here? Portuguese is, depending on who you talk to, the 6th or the 5th or the 7th most spoken language in the world, and yet we can't get these endowments that the Armenian community has. Armenian community gives each one of their students $500 for taking a language class, or $750 if they take, level 2, or, and it keeps on going. Yet why? Because they have an $8 million endowment. So I think we need to kind of concentrate a little bit on that too, as a legacy giving. It's not like everybody's going to give, $1 million. Not everybody's. It hasn't been with the Armenian community. It wasn't 8 people at $1 million each. Okay. But it was a multitude of not more than 30. Okay.
But it was also consolidated. That's the problem. We're fractured so much. That's what I see as an issue.
Concentrate on 3 areas. I always say, I'm going to be, a little bit, looking at my neck of the woods. But I've always said, if you want to look at 3 areas of the state, look at San Jose State. If you want to look at state universities, San Jose State, Fresno State, San Diego State, you cover
exactly.
pretty much covered the state that way.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You may want to add one in the LA area, but you cover those three, and those three all have Portuguese programs, and so it's one area. But let me move forward. I wanted to. We just spent almost an hour. I know it's gone quick, but I'm going to go because I think we've touched on two or three of these things already, off and on. We didn't follow exactly. I wanted to read to you or kind of translate as I go. It's in the comments. It's from our good friend that many of you know, Commander Jorge Betancourt, who's been here at the Luso and conference and who's been here in California several times for the 25 de Abril celebration. And he mentioned, as we were talking about, he said that he wanted to make an observation, marginal observation, but that really, indeed, culturally, the Portuguese society has always been a matriarchal society, whether one wants to admit it or not. He said it was always a matriarchal society where women were the pillars of the family. He says, during the dictatorship for 50 years, o Salazarismo tried to change that, but even then could not change. And he, it brought to me, one time I was 9 years old, and I'll never forget, we were talking about this, and we were talking about something. My grandfather said something not in a very good tone to my grandmother, and my grandmother didn't answer. My grandmother was a very strong lady, and she didn't answer. And I looked at her, and then she let my grandfather go, and she said, "It's just for him to believe that he's in charge." And so I will never forget that. It's just for him
Yeah.
to believe that he's in charge.
Mhm.
So it has been a matriarchal society indeed. I'm going to turn to what is the kind of the last question as we look forward now. We've talked a little bit about the past, about the present. If you could offer some solutions, one solution, we've already talked about quite a few of them, but what piece of advice for ensuring that the Portuguese American women, especially, of all ages, of course, young and old, remain engaged really as caretakers and leaders of our culture. What would you like to see, move forward in your organizations, and not only in your organizations, and because all of you belong to organizations, but all of you are you understand what's going on, obviously, in the whole state. What would you look at some of the important one thing or various things that you'd like to see, young women really step forward and be successful, of course, in many ways, but remain these caretakers, because we've pretty much established in the last hour that women are the caretakers of culture and of stories and of narratives in our Portuguese American community. And indeed, if you want to listen to a story, go to Evolve. Usually Evolve is a bad storyteller anyway. So what are some of the things that are some of the practical solutions that you'd like to see, and that you see either women can take on their own, or organizations, or they can try to change something within their own organization? Anybody wants to start, or shall I pinpoint someone?
Start.
Okay.
I would say two things, one organizationally and then one for the individual, right? Organizationally, I would love to see some of our organizations implement some type of like leadership training, right? Whether that, and it can be virtual, it can be in person, it can be, maybe it's a women's network, something. And frankly, leadership training can benefit everybody. It doesn't have to benefit just women, right? But especially for the younger generation, even like maybe kids coming out of high school who are in college, young professionals, like, and I'm not talking about how to be a Portuguese style leader. I'm just saying, listen, we're trying to cultivate, there's lots of leadership trainings out there in the world, but sometimes they're expensive, sometimes they're hard to access, sometimes maybe you don't know where to look. So if some of our local organizations can offer that to the community, it's much more accessible, and you're getting it from a trusted source, right? Like you're a fellow Portuguese, and and you have business leaders in the community that can come and do some of the presentations, right? And that therefore hopefully make it more cost effective, right? So I would love to see something more along those lines to cultivate leadership skills, because I think you may have a lot of people out there that say, I wouldn't mind being president, or I wouldn't mind starting something, but I just don't know I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get started, right? So I think teaching people how to do that. On the individual side, I would just say to anyone who's out there thinking, oh, I wish there was this in my city, or I wish there was this thing in my community, start it, just start it. Even if that's starting a Facebook page and seeing who joins and there's a discussion, and then you take it to the next level and actually start it. Maybe that's an event, maybe it's a class, maybe it's a new club, I don't know. But if you have been wanting something in your area, then start it. Don't wait for someone else to do it. And I think that's what it takes. I think our community, unfortunately, has been in an, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of an apathetic state for a while, right? It's like someone else will do it, someone else will take care of it, someone else will run the festa, right? And then all of a sudden the festa's not there anymore. What happened? Right? Well, no one was there to take over. So I think we need to really look at ourselves and realize that if we don't do it, no one's going to do it, right? No other community is going to do it. The Hispanics aren't going to do it for us. The Armenians aren't going to do it for us. The Indians aren't going to do it for us. The Italians aren't going to do it for us. Like, they're doing their stuff for their own community, right? We have to help ourselves, and we have to do it for our community. So to quote my friend Denise here, which is my favorite quote you've ever said, "You're proud to be Portuguese? That's awesome. What are you going to do about it?" So.
Nadine and Linette, which one would you like to jump in? Nadine, you're jumping in. Okay.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of silver bullets, like I said, but I still think that, I am new to these communities. I was not involved in a lot of this stuff growing up, and we've got so many great resources. Look at these ladies. Look at, a lot of the people that spoke on the conference thus far. Great ideas, great resources. And I really think we need to collaborate more. I think we need to get together. I think we need to leverage off each other's platforms. Like you said, Angela, you've got all this information on the website. That's great. We need to connect with that. Luso needs to be able to attach that. The problem we have is we have, the older generation that is leading the charge in these different communities, because those are the only ones that are volunteering to be there, right? We don't have a lot of younger people, or they don't have time. And we need to figure out how to, how to tap into our resources more effectively across our organizations, because we just don't have enough people and enough money to do, each of us to do it on our own. It just doesn't make any sense, right? So that's what I'd like to see, is figuring out a way that we can get these groups together. I like, exposing kids to Portugal or Brazil or something like these position, these trips abroad or something like that. You really connect with the kids when they're there. Those are things that are interesting. When my dad started, before the first version of Luso, before it actually became Luso, the whole idea was nobody knew where Portugal was. It was in Puerto Rico. It was like, nobody knew what Portugal was, right? And he said, that's why we started what we did. And now everybody knows where Portugal is. Everybody knows about Portugal. Half the US wants to move there. And it's like, let's figure out a way how to leverage that attention and interest of our communities, right? Because we haven't been doing that. And there is this huge awareness now of Portugal. I went with my kids. I took my kids to Portugal like way back in 2016 or something. And my daughter comes back and she's like, and then all of a sudden all her friends were going to Portugal. She goes, all of a sudden, she goes, when we went, it was like no big deal. Nobody really thought about it. Now it's like everybody's going there, So yeah, it's a lot more aware. So I'd like to leverage that too.
It's a good point also, Nadine, which is when you said you weren't, really as growing up, and then, in your professional life, you weren't in the Portuguese American community, but then now that you're retired, you have time. And I think that there's a lot of Portuguese Americans like that, were busy, I mean, they were involved in the Portuguese community when they were teenagers, and then they had, a 40-year career, and now they may have some time. We should also recruit some of these folks. Linette, your thought?
Taking a little bit from everybody else. The harsh reality is that our communities, there isn't the immigration waves. Our communities aren't coming. And I think all of us that are on this panel, we're still in a position that we can touch the past and be aware of the future to build that bridge. The organizations talk about they can't bring in new kids. or new membership, I should say. And so Zeca Rodriguez and I, through a different project, thought about doing something called a legacy membership. And so we met with, we had a meeting with the organizations. Not all of them were present, but quite a few of them were, to say, would you be willing to give 1 year of free membership to your organization? And then after the year, they can choose if they liked what they saw to continue or not to continue. But it would be free. They'd have to pay for a spouse, maybe, but theirs is free. You know, everybody likes a deal, right? So only one organization came back that said they weren't interested. And I understand, because our organization, the Aliança Suriana, it's very popular. They have quite a large membership, but and so what we were going to do was to raffle these legacy memberships to people for this event. Anyway, that's a little bit more complicated. But anyway, that was one way of kind of trying to build a membership, because once you get, and Angela talked about leadership, once you bring them in, then the mentoring can start, because they can't be presidents right away, but they can watch from the sidelines, then ease their way in, and then, you know, perhaps become leaders. You know, that's one way of bringing in new blood. And as far as women involved, it's kind of hard, because I see today, it tends to be more females in these organizations anyway, but I think the outreach, we're not going to be picky whether they're male or female, that if they want to be part of what we are about, we're going to obviously accept them and help them and support them, whether it's with a free membership, a scholarship, you know, information. You know, now with DNA, people are very interested knowing that they have, you know, in their roots. So we see more people traveling. You know, before our Portuguese immigration that came, they came with what they knew, as far as what they knew coming from the Azores or from wherever. And they kind of got stuck in time. And so today's younger Portuguese, they know their grandparents or maybe they're their parents, but they really, a lot of them don't realize that Portugal is, in many respects, even more advanced than we are. And so offering that opportunity through travel, through scholarships, I think would help expand the interest of Portugal as well.
I'm gonna,
You know, Denise, I was just saying, you know, you've through CPAC have organized like the virtual leadership training, right? I think it's what, 3 years now you've done it. And so, you know, what if people took that model, right, and replicated it locally, like, not to give you more work, but it's clearly you've shown what can be done, right? And so there's an existing resource that can be adapted, right? For example, at some of the conventions, right, at the Luso or the PFSA convention, you've got a captured audience, and instead of one of the meetings, you have a workshop where you're delivering something similar to what you did virtually, right? I mean, I think there's ample opportunity to insert some of these types of new initiatives around leadership into some of our existing events, right? So, and I think the leadership trainings that you have organized, that's the only one I've ever seen, right? Frankly, in our community. Maybe there's some on the East Coast that we just don't see because we're not there. But I have never seen, aside from what you've done, here is some leadership training specifically for our Portuguese youth. And so it's a fantastic initiative, and I think it could be replicated.
As you know, because you're on the board, we have still funding for it, and we can secure funding for it. We gave each person a $400 check. And Linette actually and Zidalmiro helped us by getting 2 people from San Diego the year we did it. We offered it last year again, but we only had 2 people, and I can't do one with that.
That tells me, like, why wouldn't someone take advantage of it? I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't think we're probably, well, one of the things I really do think is exactly what you mentioned, and Linette and Nadine, all 3 of you, which is the issue of getting the information out. I mean, we have,
this is the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, a lot of Facebook pages are good, but sometimes that's an evil because we
Yeah.
don't. Well, let me just.
Young people aren't on Facebook.
Yeah,
And
I was gonna say, young people are not on Facebook. My daughter's not on Facebook, so it's like really
Well,
limiting.
TikTok,
Mhm.
Or
obviously,
Instagram
and
seems to
Instagram.
be popular.
And we actually CPAC has a
Mhm.
Instagram, and we've put things, and we did put on there, but we didn't get. I believe that. Okay, first of all, I think we need to disseminate information better, as all of you have said it.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, let's be honest, and Nadine knows this, and we can. I think we have to be self-critical also. You know, I mean, this is a conference. We have like what 15 directors. I think there were 3 or 4 that actually put it on their Facebook page of the Luso-American Education Foundation. Okay, so the other 10 didn't find it was worth the little linky, that you put on there.
They didn't know how to do it.
Well, or they don't want to do it because they know how to put the
Probably.
picture of their brain.
Well, I don't know.
But anyway,
Anyway, yeah, but
so I think we need to be a little bit more. Sometimes we just, we need to be a little more focused on that. But we are willing, and I can say we because Andrew's on the board. CPAC is willing to do this every year.
Mhm.
We had 10 presenters. They all were free of charge, except one. I had to pay a little honorarium. The others were all free of charge. We have an excellent, we have a teachers here at Reedley College in Fresno State, Dr. Linda Carvalho Cooley, Portuguese background. Her parents are from Portugal. And she is one of the best communication teachers out there. And she's willing to do this every year, I think you attended, she did that presentation with the colors and everything. It was just fascinating. And so we have the resources. I just need 15 young people in
Mhm.
California or anywhere, because actually one of the kids from California had moved from San
Mm.
Diego, had moved to Phoenix when he participated. So we're willing to do that, number one. Number two, leadership. Somebody was mentioning, I think it was Linette, about legacy,
Membership.
and also membership, and I think that's important. Young people today, or I mean young, Angela's age. So we're talking about people, in their 30s and 40s. They do have, they want to see some kind of return for what they're investing, obviously.
yes.
And so, and I'll give you just one very quick example. The Tulare Younger Sister City Foundation has been around for many years, 60 years actually. It's the oldest sister city program in the United States with a Portuguese city. And so what's we have had no membership, and then I enticed everybody to do a membership, but it was very low. When we became partners with Fresno State, and we're partners in that exchange program where 4 students go every year to Portugal to study agriculture, and 4 from there come over here, our membership grew dramatically. When we had a dinner, we only do one dinner per year. We had a dinner and we took 4 of those students there, and they gave testimonials of how much they learned in the Azores. I think that night we got like 50 or 60 members. And so I think people have to see some kind of a value,
I totally agree with that, Denise. It's like they don't see value. We have to figure out how to show benefits. I agree. And and then Linette, we ended up at Luso. Brad recommended that we do for the scholarship recipients. They have a free membership.
Oh,
When they get a scholarship, we've tacked on a membership recently, like last year or so. And then at some point, I don't know if it's 5 years or 3 years or whatever, then it goes into a paying membership that they want to continue. But we also need to figure out how to reach these people. So they get a check, but that's it, right? They get the check, like you said, there's no payment back to, there's no, community back, service back to the organization. There's no connections. We need to figure out how to tap into that, because just giving the check, it's like, here you go, and then they're gone, right?
Well, I'm going to ask you one more question because we have a little bit of time. Why not? And I think it's an important question, which is the part about unity in a divisive climate. And I mean, I
Mm.
don't want to be political, but we all are political one way or another. Um, uh, but no, it was interesting. The other day, I saw a dear friend who put something online. She said, "I don't want to get political," but then she took the political role of one of the parties. Okay, but I'm not doing this partisan, obviously, for many reasons, and one of them is because Luso-American Education Foundation is not a political organization, and neither is PBBI at Fresno State. But we are in a polarized society. Within our Portuguese communities, you can see that. I mean, I mentioned that, and I know people in one valley town that get out of the town when there is a festa. Okay, they no longer go to the festas; they actually get out of town. Okay, I know them personally. They get out of town because they feel bad that they want to go to the festa. but they just, they don't want to be involved in a political debate. I don't either, really, to be honest with you. At first, I want to just have some termoço and maybe a Sagres or a Superbach or whatever. So how do we create a cohesive narrative that really, respects the diversity of voices while resisting, partisan or any other kind of division? And because I think women can play a role in this much more than men can. Guys are like, most men are like, I said that, and that's just the way it's going to be. And most women I know said, well, I said that, but maybe let me have a second look at this, So a lot more conciliatory. I mean, you value humanity, I think, a bit different than men do, depending of what your political affiliation is, I think, in both sides. That's not to say that's for everybody. That's not a general statement, obviously. But, what role can women play in unity and respectful dialogue? Because we do need, as a community, to have this dialogue. We do need to have people on both sides of the aisle. I keep on saying this in CPAC. If it's a Republican district, let's find a Republican person to run so we can have a Portuguese in there. If it's a Democratic district, let's find a Democrat that will run so we can have a Portuguese American, in that position. We cannot be a one-party system. That's called a dictatorship. We kind of tried that little thing in Portugal. That's why my parents left. So, how do we have this dialogue? And do you think women can really play model roles in unity and dialogue with respect? Does anyone want to take this on first, or should I just have what I do in my classroom? Do we have a voluntário or a vítima? Linette.
Well, I don't know if you brought up this question because of my posts online.
No, it wasn't you, obviously.
But that's okay. I stand behind my posts. Yeah, again, I don't know that anybody who might read something or have a discussion with me about my beliefs cares if I'm a female or a male. I mean, if they're male or female, because I have to say these last 8 years or 10, whatever it is now, has really, I was never very political until about 8 or 9 years ago. And so I think, that key word of respect is important. I have learned a lot in terms of the manipulation of social media, of cable TV, and I try to bring those things forward to let people know, whatever side they're on, be careful, because you can't believe everything you read, and to be really careful about it. And I try to be respectful. I'm not one to put ugly posts on of people. I try to respect the position or the office of the president in this case. But it's been really, really difficult because I know I'm not going to change anybody's mind, because they're as passionate about their views as I am about mine. But again, I haven't seen this thing about not going to a festa because of political debate. I haven't seen it online. I've seen those people, but not in a public view for some. I mean, it just hasn't happened, I think. Yeah, it's kind of like people aren't always sure what somebody's political view is, so they don't take it in a public venue. But I don't know. I don't know if it really, personally, if it matters that I'm a woman. Maybe people look at me, but I think that the younger people today don't really care if you're female or male. It's what you say that makes a difference. So.
It's just because it has to be with respect, as you mentioned, and you're very respectful on your posts. And everybody has an opinion. It's okay. I don't mind looking at an opinion that's totally different than mine. It's just that I see this divisiveness. Actually, the very first time before I've heard of this family that I know, we had an online discussion, actually, and El Manu Costa mentioned this, a good friend of all of us, that he knew people in the community that also weren't going to festas because of they didn't want to get involved in political discussions. And I have some very good friends, and they know where I'm standing, and I know where they're standing. And when they come to me, I say, like, if you guys want to have a discussion, this is not going to enter right now. However, I do think we need to dialogue with each other. I think even in politics. And I think what I'm seeing now sometimes online, I don't know if any of you have seen, is that people put something about the Portuguese American community, and then people put these comments like fake news. No, it's not. I mean, it may not be something that you know about in the Portuguese world, but it's not fake news, or something. It's happened to us, at PBBI because we do this online novidades. We take news from Portugal, the Azores mainly, and we translate 3, 4. And sometimes I get these comments, through WordPress, which is what we use, saying it's fake news. No, it's not. Here's a story in Portuguese. That's what's happening. So I think that it's the phraseology sometimes is coming into effect our even community. And I'm
Yeah.
afraid if it takes off, where do you end it? How do you, because we need to be more unified, as all of you have mentioned,
Yeah.
not.
I just like to say, thank goodness that we have choices, whatever side you're on. Not long ago, Dr. Ricardo Vasconcelos, who's going to be doing the presentation, he's the Dean of Portuguese and Spanish at San Diego State, presentation about the Cabrillo Festival from 1969. And he sent me a short message saying, I'm so surprised that in 1968, that the Portuguese community really were so willing to work with the government of Salazar. And what I wrote to him was, that's all they knew. I mean, they didn't know anything else. I mean, that's all they knew. And especially the people from the Azores, they're very accepting. That's all they knew. And Salazar, in terms of education, didn't really want them to wander outside of what he was providing. So it doesn't surprise me. They were, they did it, and I'm glad they did, because it established us as a community. Portugal helped us put Cabrillo on the map for that time. But the people today, for the most part, are younger people. I mean, younger even than me, that are the most vocal. Probably my age and a little lower, but the older people really haven't. I don't see them as involved. They might, I have to say, the summer when I was traveling, whether I was in Morocco or in Portugal or in the Azores, they would say, what's happening to America? What's happening? I can't believe this is. I only had one person tell me they were 100% for the other side, and that was somebody from San Diego, a Portuguese person. I was very shocked, but anyway.
I think there are two things that we as a community have to change our mindset or get our mindset in line with. Two things. One, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? So if we are helping each other, we're helping everybody. This sense of competition amongst organizations, amongst islands, amongst islanders versus mainlanders, all of that has to go away, because it doesn't matter which committee. The people from Pico are putting on this dinner, so I'm not going to go. And the people from Lisboa are putting on that dinner, so I'm not going to go. All of that has to go away. And we have to embrace this idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. When we all do well, when one person does well, we all do well, and we should all celebrate each other's successes. Second is that we have to separate the greater good for the community from our personal views on politics, right? So again, these people that get out of town for the festa because they don't want to, well, first of all, if there are political entities in the parade, I think that shouldn't be allowed, because it's not a political event, right? So I think there's no place for that. And I think it's really sad that they chose to not go and support a festa simply because of political views, right? Now, I don't know the whole backstory, but, if I didn't go to an event or support an organization because I didn't like somebody or thought that somebody involved in that organization did something bad, or we had differing views, I might not go anywhere or support anything. right? So I think we have to separate, listen, it's, this organization is doing good things for the community. They're keeping our traditions alive. They're keeping our organization alive. They're offering something good for the community. I may not agree with everything, but that's separate. I'm still going to go and I'm still going to support it, right? So I think people have to learn to separate the two and just have a level head about things, because the whole political divide is a much bigger beast, and it's nationwide. It is not just within our community. And we, as our small community, aren't going to solve it. Right? That's on the world stage that things have to be solved. We're talking here about how do we preserve our community, right? Our little community here in California, nationwide, whatever state, right? And so that needs to be the focus. So separate that and focus on the greater good for the community. And then, we need to support everybody.
I think those are all great points that both of you raised. I think the dialogue is key. And I agree. I don't try to change people's opinions, but I do have a problem when somebody doesn't respond. Like if they have, I don't need to tell, if somebody doesn't need to tell me they agree or disagree with something. But I think they just need to acknowledge, yeah, this is kind of not good, or this is good, or I support, or whatever it is. I just need something communicated back to me. I have a girlfriend who is very much on the other side from where I am, and she basically shuts me down whenever I say anything that's even remotely political, which is very hard to deal with, because I don't get any traction to say, yeah, because I say, I'm spinning. I'm like, it's, talk about, trying to come down to earth. It's very, very hard for me right now in this current environment. And I just need somebody to say, yeah, I get it, or something like that, and just acknowledge, right? And so, yeah, I don't expect, and I agree, I don't expect to change people's opinions, because I won't. That's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to spend my energy on that. But I do expect you to be open about the fact that this is what's going on. Just be aware. Hello,
Right.
just acknowledge, acknowledge
Right.
it. That's all. But I think diversity, equity, inclusion is getting a bad rap lately. And from my experience, I think diverse viewpoints provide varying perspectives, which are vital to help us grow and innovate. Equity makes sure that you build that diversity at the table, and inclusion allows everyone to feel comfortable to speak up and add value. So it's unfortunate that we've got this bad DEI thing out there right now, because I don't think that's helping. And so that's an area that would be nice if we could kind of go beyond that and start, bringing people and having everybody at the table that can be and view the viewpoint. But Angela, your points are, I think, I think they're very, very good.
Indeed.
Thank you. Yeah, just one more thought, because I think we have to wrap up here, Denise. But what can women do specifically? And again, whether, kind of as Linette said, whether it's women or men, everybody, the arguments that happen on social media are hard to moderate, because everybody's more apt to be way extreme and say things they probably wouldn't say in person, right? So two things. Maybe we as leaders can post things that are more neutral or level-headed, and encourage people to be kind of, as you said, Nadine, like understanding and acknowledge, right? You're not here to change people, but let's try and understand each other. And then secondly, maybe help people realize that they have more in common as Portuguese, right? Let's focus on what we have in common as far as like culture and food and music and things like that. And let's not let this political mess divide us as a community, because we have a lot more in common, and we have a lot more that we could be enjoying as fellow Portuguese, right? In different events and initiatives, than to let the political mess of the day, right? Because this isn't the first one. Decades and decades and decades of political turmoil have happened, since the dawn of time. Let's not let that divide us. Let's focus on what we have in common, and let's focus on doing what's going to help the community as a whole. I think is a good.
I agree, Angela, but I would caution that it's happening. Okay, it's happening if we look at social media. I don't look at social media to see what, you know, I look at so I wish I had a second career, or I wish I had another 25 years or 30 to live, because I would take on sociology. I think it's a study on social media. Yes, indeed, people, behind a camera think, or, behind whatever, a keyboard, all of a sudden become warriors of whatever. But I think that, and I know examples that I've registered in little notes that I have, in my notebooks, that are a mess. But, I mean, I can, not going to name a name, but there's a young man here locally in the Valley that is so involved in Portuguese American organizations. I mean, that guy is just amazing at what he's talented, and he's involved in everything from folklore to bands to the carnaval that the status style people do and everything. But he has a political view, okay, which is different than maybe than some people in this part of the valley. And the poor guy is ostracized everything every time he puts on there. Everybody just kind of forgets everything that he does that's good for the
Yeah,
community.
that's unfortunate.
Goes after him, and I don't know if he's gonna. I hope he has enough stomach, and I think he does anyway, to just let this go by. But it cannot, I mean, geez, let him have his opinion. Don't just
Yeah.
don't answer. If I see plenty of things on. I just let it go, because I'm afraid that if we kind of chastise on one side or the other, it doesn't make any difference. If we chastise these people, or these people, I mean, these members of our community for their political thoughts, okay, um, with sometimes abrupt things. I mean, one of the things was, one of the phrases was that old Portuguese phrase. The person said, "Oh, in Portugal, a gente diz tolo calado passa por discreto," which means, a dumb person quiet, if a dumb, shut your mouth. If you don't open your mouth, everybody thinks you're intelligent, and when you open your mouth, you're kind of not so intelligent. And so, calado passa por discreto means calado passa por tolo calado passa por inteligente, and it's just abrupt, uncivil things that, to be honest with you, I never thought my dad or my other generations. I mean, I used that at the end of the other one, in the beginning, when we were talking about, offline before we got on with Dr. Barroca, him and I are on opposite sides, but we've always treated each other. We've even talked about politics, and we did talk about politics. Was that, it was with him giving me not much, a pat on the back, and I did, and I appreciated it immensely, but saying, "But I don't agree with you." So I think that the level of it is what I don't think these people that were told, that I've been told at both levels, it's not that they didn't want to. Actually, one of them is actually donates, money, and pretty good amounts, in the high hundreds to the festa, and they just donate and they leave because they don't want to go there. And they know that these people are very involved on the other side, and they don't want to go there. And I guess they've gone there, and they've been kind of questioned. Why are you so? Why are you of that political nature, whatever? And so I just let's keep that completely away. You were right when you said let's keep it away from the festas, because last year there were lots of political things at Bulge Lake, at the
I remember seeing that. Yeah.
yeah. And so let's just keep it away from both sides, okay?
I liked Elaine's comment the other day about the fact when at San Pablo, when somebody starts talking politics, they are geared to like redirect, right? So that's good.
Well, I don't think we're going to resolve everything, but
No, we're not.
I think civility is important in the community, and I think I've come from a family that my dad was very vocal, but he never let anybody that he disagreed with not be his friend. Okay, and he actually enjoyed discussing these things, maybe a bit too much, but with people. And so let's, as you said, Angela and Linette and Nadine, let's keep the Portugueseness in us, because in Portugal we are of different political parties too. I mean, and there's just not two of them. So, and I think, but and we can be just be a bit more respectful, and I'm just afraid if young people whatever political party, if young people get assaulted, as has happened to me, as I've seen with this young man, I just think that they're going to get discouraged and they're going to give up the
Yeah,
Portuguese.
they have no patience
That
for
would
it. Yeah.
be totally, totally disastrous for us.
Yeah.
We need
would
to
be.
we need to be examples of uniters, not dividers.
Right.
That's a
And
wonderful.
I
It's a
like the
great way
idea
to
of,
end it, Linette.
yeah,
I love it.
I like the idea of focusing on the community, and that's what we need to do, what we have in common. Yeah.
Focus on a community. Uniters, not dividers, is a good way to end. That's Nadine and Angela and all of you for joining us. We'll be back at noon to talk about Portuguese education.
Pretty soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.